All right. So if you haven't already, go back and watch parts one and parts two. Yes, there's some dry parts there, but if you kind of follow me with this video series, you're going to see some good stuff because both my sister and I are recording our experiences and trying to, uncover our DNA and our ancestry, the people in our family, everything. All kinds of good stories are evolving, which I haven't even told you about yet. So you need to have this background. It's like one of those good miniseries. They start off kind of slow because you have to just get into the details and the meat, and then you start getting into the dessert like midway through the season. But I won't take that long. So I need you to follow this. I need you to follow this and follow all the different family trees discussions I'm going to have about this. So my grandfather. So my grandfather passed. My natural grandfather, my mom's father, apparently passed away from cancer. All right, lung cancer, and different people who knew him said he also had heart disease and a little bit of arthritis, little things like that. My mom passed away from lung cancer. So did her brother. And it was a very special strain of lung cancer that you don't necessarily get from smoking. It's an inherited form of vicious cancer called small cell lung cancer. You can smoke or not smoke. If you smoke, you will most definitely activate it, according to the doctors. But even if you don't smoke, if you have the gene for this type of cancer, it's a significant percentage of chance that you will acquire it. So, I'm constantly doing things to keep myself cancer free. I don't smoke. I drink one drink once, maybe twice a week, and it's like 4 ounces if I drink that much. And I always follow with water, but I just don't even bother with alcohol. And I eat, I take my vitamins and exercise. And I try to keep stress out of my life. I don't surround myself with toxic people and toxic environments because those things can activate stress because I know it's in my family. So he had all of these really interesting life threatening diseases. Oh, he also had diabetes. So anything he had, he would have passed down to other relatives, other children, and other grandchildren will begin to manifest those same properties. There are certain personality traits that have come out in me and my brothers and sisters that you don't see in other people and on the other branches of the family tree. For for instance, as a little girl, I would spend a significant amount of time just daydreaming for no reason. I would be sitting in a chair next to someone and I would just go off into space for hours. And people would be talking to me and explaining things to me, and I wouldn't pay attention, and I would kind of zone back in. And they would say, "Were you here? What were you doing?" And they would ask a question based on what they had been talking to me about, and I couldn't answer it because I wasn't there. All right. Uh, at later on in life, my mom took me to the doctor, and they said, "Oh, this is a condition that could be inherited," and we we don't know. We didn't come from the other side of the family. Today, I'm pre-diabetic. Today, I'm pre-hypertensive. All these pre things, no matter what I do, I have these conditions that are kind of hovering right there beneath the surface. And same with my sister. My sister, is actually quite thin, and she has the same thing. Everything's pre. Something's going on with one of her kidneys, and it's like, oh, they came from your grandfather's side of the family. It's all of these things that because we don't have access to him and his medical information, we're in the dark on what this is, why this popped up, right? So the other reason it's important to know who our grandfather is is because he is the last known descendant we have in this long line of Robinsons, right? So Robinson wasn't his real name, that was his slave name. We would like to know which slave master owned him. We would like to know, were there other, did he have brothers and sisters? Are there people running around Greenville, Detroit, or even Atlanta that I could have potentially come in contact with, and possibly dated? Because men had a tendency back then, as now, to kind of sling their sperm around, and you have to watch who you date because of it. I mean, remember back, up until recently, you had to get a blood test. When I was married years ago, we had to get a blood test, and that blood test did test for any chromosome abnormalities or any similarities genetically. That's all it came down to. We just want to make sure y'all ain't kin before you walk down this aisle. So those things are important. Those things are very important to know. There's also strength in knowing who your family is. There's strength in terms of finances. There's strength in having connections, having a home, having a belonging to a group of people, having a heritage you could share. We don't have any of that. All of that just been cut off. All we know in my family is each other, and then we have my dad's side of the family, which is also kind of sketchy. There's lots of information over there that we are also piecing together because people stopped talking to each other, things happened, relationships broke apart, and people decided not to associate. So our familial sphere of influence is very small, very, very small because of it. Um, anyway, let me go back to the conversation with. No, I don't want to talk to you all. The phone call came in. Let me go back to my conversation with my great great aunt. So I remember as a child growing up and reacting to the strong statements adults would make to me. They would say, "Don't do that, or you're just gonna be one of those fast-tailed girls. So don't say that because that's not what good girls do." There were a lot of rules passed down to me from the elder women in my family because things occurred in their lives as women that they were too ashamed to talk about. So rather than share that information, the things they did, maybe the men they slept with, maybe the affairs they had, maybe the babies they had out of wedlock, I don't know. Instead of sharing that information, they chose to turn those events and incidents into lessons that then translated into these cliched and yet abusive statements that were meant to correct me as a young black girl, which was very harmful because by the time I was of age to make my own decisions as a woman, all I had were cliches to fall back on. I didn't have any real information. I didn't have any knowledge. I didn't have any lessons learned. No one shared stories of things that happened back in the day. And so, you just kind of stumble through life and you hope the mistakes you make don't kill you or take you out of the race. Our family has come a long way. And as I go further into this series, you will understand just how far and the role that my grandfather by birth has, the role my grandfather by marriage has, the role my dad has in that, how all of these experiences that happened prior to my arrival on this planet have affected us today. And what I would like to see occur going forward is that we spend time kind of sharing information with each other instead of behaving as if we were perfect. That we actually look at what actually occurred in the past and create real scenarios and real narratives based on how people actually behaved not what we romanticize, not what we just kind of throw together and create a quick type of opinion so we can get a good clickbait title for YouTube, or say something catchy and snappy to denigrate another group in our demographic. I have found that the statements I see said about Black women, said about Black men, Black children, Black people, and about people in general are 99.9% not true. They're not true. It's that people lack critical thinking skills and we don't remember our history. We willfully don't remember our history. Some of us just don't want to know our history. And so it's easy to make up statements about things that you see rather than look at the fact that most of what you see is simply the product of human nature. This is how people behave, right? Case in point, I'm going to end this video. Our grandmother's mother, her name was Lily Royster. Lily shows up in the 1920 census as just a single mother who had a child named Alma Johnson. Now, I remember my grandmother mentioning her father and that his name was Johnson, and her last name is Johnson. But it doesn't show in that census if they were married. If Lily Royster and Mr. Johnson were married. And there's no other documentation that shows that they were married. What we do know is that my grandmother, Almarie Johnson, was raised by Lily Royster. Lily Royster died from ovarian cancer. And then Pearline Minor, Lily Royster's sister, raised my grandmother like from age 10. From age 10 on, she raised her. That's all we know. So that means if this is the case, if we can't see any mention of a husband, then that tells me that not everyone got married back in the day when they became pregnant. That also tells me that this whole narrative that men were so much more righteous back then and that women were so much more chaste back then is also a false narrative. And the incidents of marriage that you did see appear to be based on survival more than love. It was a functional product of what people had to do in order to create families and survive together as a group. Fast forward to today. Fast forward to today and what statistics show occur when we get married and when we have children. So I don't want to talk about that in this video. I'm going to work that into another video. But I would like to start like examining the whole idea that it's okay not to fit the narrative that someone prescribes for you. That maybe we need to start like sincerely, generously identifying those things, those stimuli that affect the decisions that we make about relationships, money, jobs, our health, all of those things. I'll give you a hint at what I'm thinking about. No, I'll save it for the next video. I'll save it for the next video. I will say this. I'll say, and I'm going to say it for the women. A lot of what we do as women, what we aspire to be, and what we aspire to achieve is based on narratives and the opinions of people external to your situation. A lot of us aspire to be wives or mothers or successful career women or we aspire to make X amount of money, right? And if we aspire, if we accomplish those things, then we are successful, and that defines our womanhood. I want to challenge the concept that your womanhood has to be defined by any one of those four items. And I'm going to use history in an examination of the history of my family to help support my point that those issues are not important. Stay tuned.